public input related to this until now. Why don't we go ahead and start that? I would say at the outset that we are required as a board to have 30 minutes of public input. We have 29 people signed up. I am okay with the rest of the board's consent if we go over that, but I don't want to go over that by a whole bunch. And I would also say that at this point, this has been a topic of discussion for many months. So I think most of what can be said has been said. But with that, let's get started and see how far down the list we can get.
And if I could ask if speakers have copies of their comments that they could give to me, that would be great. Otherwise, your comments will be summarized. The first speaker is Howard Pfeiffer.
And I do, I didn't give our little guidance to public input at the beginning. So let me remind folks that you will have 3 minutes to speak. The green light illuminates for the first 2 minutes. The yellow light illuminates along with one beep to let you know you have 1 minute remaining. The red light will illuminate along with 3 beeps when the 3 minutes have expired. If possible, please provide a copy of your comments to the clerk. And we are going to stick very tightly to the 3 minutes. Mr. Pfeiffer.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Howard Pfeiffer, and I am a resident of Chatham County. I have always believed that the good people of Chatham, left to their own devices, would be able to work out the issue of the Confederate monument in a way which everyone would be proud of. The lengthy public hearings held a few months ago on this subject supports that belief. And when the commissioners proposed and entered into a memorandum of understanding with the monument's owner, the Winnie Davis chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, at the June 17th meeting, it appeared that might happen. Now, a group I'm a member of, Chatham for All, did a public record search and learned that Commissioner Dasher had started the negotiation process before that meeting on June 17th with a letter on May 14th to Barbara Pugh, the president of the Winnie Davis branch of the UDC, requesting a meeting to, quote, see if there are any possible scenarios that would be mutually agreeable and respectful of all involved, close quote. Ms. Pugh accepted the invitation, and following their meeting, she wrote to Commissioner Dasher that she and others she checked with would be willing to work out a solution. The memorandum of understanding, agreed to unanimously by our county commissioners and signed by the Winnie Davis chapter of the UDC, was entered into on June 17th. But then on June 22nd, Sarah Powell, the president of the North Carolina United Daughters of the Confederacy, tweeted her opposition to, quote, reimagining removing the UDC's monument. Subsequently, Ms. Pugh reneged on the agreement to work out a solution and asserted that removing or altering the monument would be unlawful as it had been a gift to the county. All public records regarding that monument, as well as the inscription on the monument itself, prove that this new assertion that the monument was gifted to the county is without foundation and legally indefensible. In light of their bad faith in these negotiations by the Winnie Davis chapter of the UDC, we ask that there be no further delay in doing what is right under the law and for the people of Chatham County. We ask the board to revoke the license it granted in 1907, allow the chapter 30 days to remove its monument, and if not removed by the end of those 30 days, to remove it. It is time to move on.
Thank you, sir.
Jim Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is James Ward, and I live in Orange County. I do own some property in Chatham, and my ancestors, the Daniels, settled here in the mid-1700s, so I'm interested in what happens in Chatham. In fact, I believe that all native North Carolinians should be concerned when a government talks about taking down a monument to their ancestors. This Pittsburgh statue was erected in 1907 with a simple motive of honoring the Confederate Army and Navy veterans of Chatham County, not for the few Union soldiers of Chatham or the Spanish-American War veterans of Chatham, just Confederates. There were quite a few monuments to these veterans erected in the South during the late 1800s and early 1900s, and the reason was because the Confederate veterans were growing older or dying out, and the UDC made a concerted effort to get these statues up before all the veterans were lost. The ladies of the UDC raised the money themselves over a period of years. I doubt seriously that they appealed to donors by saying that the statues would act to suppress the black population. Their appeal was to donate in order to honor their family members who fought for the South. I suspect that those who are so vociferous about removing Confederate memorials are buying into the fallacy perpetrated by the ultra-leftist social warriors that America is irretrievably racist and misogynist and all symbols of this original sin must be wiped out. Begin with what they consider symbols of white oppression, then march back through history with pitchforks at the ready to destroy those founding fathers of this country who even have a hint of racism. There is no end of things in our history that some group will find offensive. Where will it end? I'm also beginning to think that those who want to take down the monument are in competition with Durham and Orange counties to see who lives in the most woke communities. I hope that I am wrong about this impression. All we ask is that you, the commissioners, being the upright and law-abiding citizens that you are, obey the state law and leave the statue in Pittsburgh alone. It is there to honor our ancestors, and that is its only purpose. Thank you.
Thanks. Next.
John Shirley.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is John Shirley. I live in this county in Chapel Ridge. I think we all agree that racism is wrong. It's not something that should be allowed in this society. I experienced racism myself when I moved to the Virgin Islands. My first Sunday at the First Baptist Church in the Virgin Islands, I was one of two white faces in the congregation, and I had a pew by myself in a packed church. And that was a new experience for me. I think there's people in here that probably experienced that before, but it was a new one for me. And it changed some of my attitudes about what the government was doing relative to racial equality. But when I think about these ladies with the Daughters of Confederacy in the early 1900s, I don't think they had any intent to erect a statue that would remind blacks or anyone else of how racist we were in the past, if we were in fact that racist. I think that statue, which cost them $1,700 in the early 1900s, which would buy a house back then, was well thought out, and they were honoring the 1900 soldiers that had fought in the Confederacy, some of whom had died and some of whom had become injured. And that was a war that wasn't that popular after the war. I fought in a war exactly like that, Vietnam. I came back to the same type of attitude that maybe some of the Confederate soldiers who were returning home experienced. And I can tell you, when monuments were erected to the veterans of Vietnam, I felt very good about it. So I think what some of our guests down here in the South don't realize that the South is not geography. The South goes way beyond that. In the South, we're sweet tea, we're fried chicken, we're barbecue, we're NASCAR, we're Friday nights at football games and Saturday at college football games. And, you know, I'm not saying we have a monopoly on that, but we just do it so much better than the rest of the country. Now, one thing that was drummed into me as a son of the South was manners. And it took a while for my daddy to do that. It took a switch and a belt eventually. But I do have manners. And one of the things he said to me is, when you're a guest at another person's house and you're eating at their table, you don't say their dog is ugly or the food doesn't taste good. You just enjoy the meal and leave. Now, I would
Folks,
say the same thing.
Mr. Shirley, 1 second. I just want to remind people you are allowed to speak. I'll give you a few more seconds. When you are at the podium, I don't want to hear a bunch of shouting and whooping and hollering from the crowd on both sides. So thank you.
Thank you. For our guests down here, and we love our guests in the South, but I think it's time that they try to assimilate a little and embrace the South and not try to fight against it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emily Moose.
Good evening. My name is Emily Moose. I am a resident of Chatham County and a supporter of Chatham for All, here in that capacity alone. I am a Southerner and a North Carolina native whose ancestors include a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, Confederate soldiers, and a daughter of the American Revolution. Now that I have credentialed myself, I would like to clearly state that none of this should matter. In the United States of America, we should all expect our government to uphold our basic human rights, in deed and in symbol. For the last 2 years, members of this community have asked you to return this statue to its owner, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, or UDC. Native and newcomer, veteran and civilian, Republican and Democrat, African American, white, Hispanic, and near every demographic slice of our county have made compelling arguments for why this statue should be returned. In summary, and for anyone new to this conversation, I ask you to consider the following. 1, the majority of speakers coming before you to support Chatham for All's request: peaceful, legal removal of the monument in front of the courthouse and return to its owner, the UDC. 2, you have a petition with nearly 1,000 signatures from residents of this county asking you to do the same. The opposing petition misled signers in representing the monument as an honor to African Americans. 3, you have the legal authority to revoke the license granted to the Winnie Davis UDC in 1907 and remove the monument if the UDC fails to remove it within a reasonable time. The Winnie Davis UDC now claims the monument was a gift to the county. However, all public records show that claim to be legally unsupportable. The monument's inscription says it's a gift to Confederate heroes, not to the people of Chatham County. 4, there is an overwhelming moral case for removal, as any public monument to a system codifying one race's superiority over another is antithetical to the values America claims to uphold. It constitutes a public endorsement of white supremacy and undermines the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing equal protection under the law. This statue will eventually go to rest in another place, whether it's a cemetery, a historic battleground, or on someone else's private property. How we handle this as a community is another conversation, and an important one we're having alongside communities across America. Your leadership in hosting this conversation is an example of Chatham County can be proud of as we work through this together with love and respect and emerge a more resilient community. We are a changing county in a rapidly changing world, and we are all wrestling with this change. But one thing I hope we can unite around is the principle of liberty and justice for all. You have the information, community support, legal authority, and moral clarity to make your decisions swiftly. We hope you will do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony Gata.
You might have to repeat
Anthony.
Anthony Gata, Tony Gata.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Tony Gata. I'm a retired attorney and a veteran of the United States Army, having served during the Vietnam era. I've lived in Chatham County for the past 18 years. My comments are short and simple. Tomorrow marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival in Jamestown, Virginia, of a Dutch ship carrying 20 Africans bound against their will, and so the slave trade in the United States began. Nothing like the Statue of Liberty welcomed them. They were not immigrants voluntarily coming to our shores to find either religious freedom or escaping violence, famine, or war. They were used like beasts of burden, considered an inferior race of people, and forced to work both outdoors and in, by and large, under intolerable conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roxanne Shager.
Hi. Regarding the Confederate statue, an artifact is any object made by a human being, and history is the record of past events and times, especially in connection with the human race. I've heard people argue that this is not a historical artifact, but it is by that definition. So it's part of our history, and though we might like to run away from our past because we're ashamed or embarrassed, we need to own our past, and we need to own it figuratively and literally. So should we leave the statue there? Well, I go back to the Daughters of the Confederacy on their website. Should they say, "We are grieved to that certain hate groups have taken the Confederate flag and other symbols as their own. The United Daughters of the Confederacy totally denounces any individual or group that promotes racial divisiveness or white supremacy. And we call on these people to cease using Confederate symbols for their abhorrent and statues have become, whether they were intended to be initially, they have become a symbol of hate." So we have outside here a symbol of hate instead of what our community is, which is very diverse. And this may be a symbol and part of our past, but it shouldn't be a part of our future. So I ask that we remove it. But when you look at removing a historical artifact, I've heard some people say, destroy it, get rid of it, send it away. And I read this, and I thought this was really important. This is a comment by a former Auschwitz inmate. He was a professor, historian, author, and a diplomat, and he was asked if Auschwitz should be demolished. He said, "Right after the war, there occurred ideas which fortunately have not been implemented to demolish the remains of Auschwitz. The justification given was that a place of such cruel murder should vanish from the face of the earth. I do not wish to say that their intentions were not honorable, but in my view, disguised behind them were other not realized motivations. When a man commits evil, he tries to obliterate its traces. Auschwitz is the sting of remorse for every person who is indifferent to the suffering of others. Auschwitz should wake people up and force them to take responsibility for the fate of our world. The Confederate statue is a symbol of hate, whether it started out that way or not, it is today, and it should be removed, and something should be put there that would unify our community. But I think it should be placed in a place secure so it could be used appropriately for the purposes of remembrance, discussion, and education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane Allen Wilson.
Thank you. My name is Jane Allen Wilson. I was born and raised here, and I've lived here for 47 years of my life. Some people who drive around this courthouse circle and see the statue don't even notice it. Some people pass by it and take pride in Southern identity and ties to family history, and that's real too. Some are reminded of the history of oppression of their ancestors and systems which have excluded and discriminated against them and still do to this day. Some of us hear it and seek to learn more. This courthouse is the seat of justice, and whether you enter this courtroom as a victim or accused of a crime, you need to trust that our courts are not swayed before we even walk in the door. We need to trust an imperfect justice system. Even if it symbolizes something for some of the people in this room who feel it's positive, we cannot have a symbol which means something very different for others in the gateways of our courts and governance. It hurts everyone. Children riding around in school buses who ask about the man in the funny hat deserve to hear from us as adults an honest conversation and an honest answer about who has been impacted. Seceding and starting a civil war became brutal. It had serious repercussions and hardship with the liberation. The North, in their pain, made sure the South paid hard, and that is also real. The problem is we forget as white people that Reconstruction also hurt our black ancestors. Our white ancestors in their pain created created a story that persists to this day, renaming our war the War of Northern Aggression, a story that totally excludes the history and experience and 200 plus years of intergenerational pain of our Black ancestors. We created a nostalgic myth of omission. It's time to really listen, and staying tied to this war makes us rigid and afraid of change. We don't have some kind of blue blood because our ancestors, like mine, fought in the Civil War. Even our ancestors might say it's time to move on. Robert E. Lee said so himself, move on. Our Southern identity should not be wrapped in 4 years of war, and we have hundreds of years being Southerners. Something that we share, whether we're white, Black, or whoever we are as Southerners, by becoming Southern or being Southern when you were born. The special virtues we can all take pride, that in the face of hardship, we are resilient and strong because we lift each other up together. We tend to look out for each other. We believe in the value of our word, and we are good storytellers. We are here on this earth for a very short time. Let's listen to the stories that were omitted for far too long. Let's honor to be rather than to seem, and let's use our good word to speak the truth and to create an honest history with no omissions. I support moving the statue from the seat of our justice in Chatham County, and I suggest to anyone from the United Daughters of the Confederacy that they move the statue to our Veterans Park in Siler City, which lacks such a monument. Thank you.
Thank you.
Betty Wilson.
I'm Betty Wilson, and I would like first to thank you for the hard work and brain power that you put into your job, and I want you to know you're appreciated. I'm here, but well, I want to just go back. I came to Chatham County a little over 60 years ago, and I just embraced the history here, and I just loved it, and I still do. I thought the statue was just part of the big picture. But then, through the years, I have come to realize that some of my friends were offended by it. And if you have a good heart, you don't want to do anything that's going to offend your friends. So I started thinking, I respect the feelings that people have for the statue. I share some of that. I also respect the feelings of people that feel offended by it. So it's not a question of who's right or wrong. It's a matter of feelings. And to me, the question is, not should it be there, but is it in the right place? So I think we can do something about that. Because anytime a community has a symbol in a very public place that is offensive, it should not be there. Our government is for all the people, justice for all people. We do not need that symbol in front of our courthouse where people look for justice to all. So I'm hoping that a place can be found and the laws can be found that will allow its removal. I've heard all these laws, you can't do this, you can't do that. But I also know that commissioners can go to legislators and get things when they need it. And we could get permission to move that statue to a more appropriate place. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Linda Cotton.
Hi. It's great to meet all of you tonight. This is the first time I've come to the commissioners' meeting, and I am new to North Carolina, and I hope to be participating and really a positive member of this community moving forward. I'm here tonight, and I asked to speak because I come from, obviously, a different part of the country, although I'm a North Carolinian. I got all the paperwork to prove it. I moved here just a few months ago from a place that is far more demographically diverse, but a place that also is a culture that values and respects that diversity. And I'm speaking very briefly tonight on the issue of the monument because when I first moved here and I drove downtown to Pittsburgh, obviously I noticed it. And honestly, it scared me. It worried me about what kind of community I had moved to. I understand that the statue is a symbol of part of our country's history, and it is our country. But it is a symbol of the darkest and most hateful time in our history. No one wants to be reminded daily of the worst part of their lives, any more than we all want daily reminders of the mistakes and horrible moments in our own personal lives. I'm here because, as a new North Carolinian, I'd like to ask you all that we don't publicly display at our public places images that remind us of our worst selves, but that as a community we can erect images and words that inspire us and lift us all up as human beings together. And I ask you for that tonight, and thank you all for your hard work.
Thanks, man.
Dora Sue Christian.
Good evening, Commissioners, residents of Chatham County. My name is Dora Sue Christian, and I've been sitting here since 4 o'clock, and I'm exhausted. I appreciate your listening to my opinion about our memorial statue. To me, the statue was placed to show respect and honor for the soldiers and veterans that were called and served. In my opinion, our statue should be left in full view for future generations to observe, ask questions, learn, and remember. Our memorial statue should not be hidden from view, but left front and center as a constant reminder of our past, our lost young men, and our veterans. My ancestor, Archibald Benjamin Caudle, son of a pastor, Reverend Allen Caudle, belonged to Company D, the 39th Infantry. He was discharged at Appomattox. My opinion was formed by the guidance of my mother, a Chatham County school teacher, my father, a Pittsburgh lawyer and solicitor in this very courthouse, and education from Chatham County school system. I graduated from Pittsburgh High School in 1959. I was taught to show honor and respect for veterans, not to speak ill of the dead. To me, we should not try to second-guess our ancestors, trying to hide our history. If you succeed, history will surely repeat itself. I'm 78 years old. I would like to think that I'm wiser than I was in my youth. In my opinion, the memorial statue should be left as it is, where it is. If you think others should be honored or remembered, add another statue or a wall. We have 3 more sides. Thank you for letting me speak in support of keeping our memorial statue as it is, where it is. As we all stood in unity to say the Pledge of Allegiance, I wish we could all stand in unity to leave the past in the past. I take offense to people that come and don't understand what Chatham County is about. If you stay here for a while and read our history, we're all loving people. I don't understand why the divisive stir the pot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jeannie DiAurora.
Thank you for, excuse me, thank you for your attention. My name is Jeannie DeRora, and I'm a 12-year resident, not a guest of Chatham County. In 1997, I traveled back to the home place in West Virginia, formerly Virginia, As you know, the western part of the state broke away during the Civil War. Serving their own ends, some referred to the Civil War as the war against Northern aggression, thereby making it easier to recruit non-slave owning men who were in the majority at the time to fight for the rich man's right to own slaves. A few men and boys in our side of the family bought into this and left home and fought and died on the side of the Confederacy. Most, however, fought to preserve the Union, referring to it as the War of Secession and insurrection. Given that the South seceded from the Union and a short time later fired the first shots on Fort Sumter in Charleston. Anyway, before 1997, I last saw the old home place the day after my grandmother's funeral in '71. No one in the family wanted to make a life there, so it was sold to a distant cousin. Although I appreciated those friendly folks allowing me to wander around through the house and out around through the yard, I was nearly overwhelmed by feelings of loss and sadness. Against all reason, I was shocked to find that over the years, the new owners had completely gutted the place inside and out and refashioned it to reflect their priorities and the changing times. How dare they? Gone was Pap's porch swing, Grandma's kitchen, her garden, the banging screen doors, the ever-present flies, the outbuildings, the pig pen, the smells, even the railroad tracks behind the house had been taken up. Apparently, I had foolishly hoped against all reason that subsequent owners would leave it unchanged as a memorial to my family. Head-shakingly unrealistic of me. So I understand that the statue out there reminds some in this room of dearly loved family members who taught them to revere it as the very embodiment of ancestors who fought and maybe even died in the Civil War. I understand that it wouldn't feel right to them if it were taken down and moved somewhere else. But the reality is that statue was placed in front of this very courthouse in 1907 during the Jim Crow era to intimidate Black Americans and send the clear message that they would find no justice inside. Tomorrow, as Tony said, we mark the 400th anniversary of the first Black African slaves brought into Virginia in 1619, although we were already enslaving the natives. We are rightly taking this opportunity to examine how slavery, referred to as our country's original sin, has left its mark. I take no pride in reporting that my own genealogy research indicates that my family, approximately 13 generations back, on my maternal grandfather's side, was accompanied by one female slave when they landed at Jamestown in 1622.
Thank you, ma'am.
I ask you to remove this statue and give it back to the UDC.
Thank you.
Kay Roberts. Kay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Kay Roberts, Chatham County. Why do I have a statue at the courthouse? This is from an article from the New York Times, April 2, 2012. New estimate raises Civil War death toll. Quote, for 110 years, the number stood as gospel. 618,222 men died in the Civil War. 360,222 from the North, 258,000 from the South. By far the greatest toll of any war in American history. But new research shows that the numbers were far too low. By combing through newly digitized census data from the 19th century, J. David Hacker, a demographic historian at Binghamton University in New York, has recalculated the death toll and increased by more than 20% to 750,000. If this war were fought today, the casualties would be over 6.2 million people. Imagine coming back from this war and knowing that your life you lived before is over. Imagine the destruction you've witnessed, the friends and family you've seen die in the most horrible deaths. I'm sure they with mental problems modern-day soldiers have seldom experienced. There were no support groups. There were no TV shows to take their mind off of what they had witnessed. I'm sure they were depressed, confused, and lost as to how they would recover. The women of the South saw and recognized this plight. They were also feeling the same feelings. They had lost their husbands, brothers, and children. Times were hard with no money and a future to rebuild. The people of Chatham County at that time were no different from anyone else in that time period. Chatham County was divided on leaving the Union, but once it did, it lost nearly 1/5 of its people. I don't think that for once the statues were erected to symbolize white supremacy or in some way to intimidate other people. I think they were erected to restore the soul of the Confederate soldier and to let them know that they were loved. These men cared for the rest of their lives the scars of war. Some had missing limbs and others had disabilities. A monument was the least the people could do to restore their faith. I believe they were put in prominent places because that was the hub of trade. What good would it have done to put it in a cornfield? I know that modern times are not as what they used to be, but I do know that people are still people and they still need the same thing since the beginning of time. Everyone wants to believe that there's someone waiting to help them overcome their pain. They want to feel love. This is exactly what our Confederate Heroes Monument stands for. Don't let them hijack the statue to make it something it is not. Please leave it alone. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, by my math, we're about 35 minutes now. You want to keep hearing from folks? I think we're through 13 of 29, give or take. All right, let's plow on.
Okay. Lisa Hudson.
My name is Lisa Hudson, and I've lived in Chatham County my whole life. Until the recent controversy stirred up by a small but vocal group, I had never heard a complaint or negative comment about our Confederate statue. This group that has the audacity to call themselves Chatham for All has decided that they want it removed. Chatham for All most certainly does not represent the views and wishes of all, or even of a majority, but they most certainly do want to impose their will on all. I'm afraid you county commissioners have already made up your minds about the statue, despite the outpouring of pleas from county residents to leave it alone. You were not elected to represent or bend to the will of Chatham for All. You were elected to represent all Chatham County residents, the majority of whom I believe want the statue left where it has proudly stood without rancor or controversy for over 100 years.
Thank you.
T.C. Hudson.
Schools, anything one person values but someone else hates. Next, will we rip up gravestones, destroy history, teach your children that it never happened? Don't dare tell them about how we ran out the American Indians. Don't tell them about any wars that were fought on this land. You can bury your head in the sand and pretend nothing ever happened. But unless you tell the truth, they won't know that freedom isn't free. And they will lose this land and become enslaved. We have books teaching us about history for a reason. So stop destroying it and wake up. Michael Mosca Sr. This is a friend of mine who's been here in Chatham County 27 years. He was born and raised in Long Island, New York, and served in the United States Navy. And while I'm up here, I was recently brought to my attention tonight that the local news media is saying that there's nobody representing leaving the statue where it stands. I'd like anybody in this room that wants it to stay where it's at, please raise their hand.
Thank you.
Beth McLaurin.
My name is Beth McLaurin. I feel that all Southerners are being judged because of the Civil War, that because we were born and raised here and that our ancestors fought in the Civil War, that we are all bad people being discriminated against by the very people that preach tolerance. We are being bullied, and I'm tired of it. The monument was not an issue until one self-righteous group decided to stir up trouble and demand that they get their way. The men and young boys, black and white, that lost their lives fighting to save their land and homes from being burned down and their possessions stolen from the Union soldiers have every right to be honored. They should be remembered. Removing the monument will not erase the history of the Civil War. In fact, thanks to the self-righteous troublemaking group, this has been more of a topic of conversation than it has been in years. I have lived in Pittsburgh all of my life, and I support leaving the monument where it is, as it is. I'm sick and tired of being tolerant of others and not receiving the same courtesy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woody Weaver.
Okay, my name is Woody Weaver. Y'all seen me up here before. You'll probably see me again. I want to say something about these videos in this room. Last time I was up here, Channel 17 News prompted me to be a Southern white devil. As some of y'all have probably seen that. So right now, I'm telling everybody that's got a video camera on me that you cannot take one. The only one I'm going to accept is the Chatham County one. So tell me which one is the Chatham County video. Which one is it? You are? Rest of y'all turn them up. I have my right. I have my right. Yes, I do have my right. You'll see me in court.
All right, I just want to remind you, you got 3 minutes. So if you have something to say on the topic, let's get it out.
Right. Now, I'm gonna talk about Mr. Pfeiffer. You got up here a couple of sessions ago, and you told this room that the Supreme Court justice decision was the World War I monument in Maryland facing across the ocean. There was a decision on that. You said to this room that that decision would take and come out to be in favor about that monument. You thought the Supreme Court was going to say it could be took down. You said it would hold prominence right out here. Well, that you cannot take it down just because you don't like something. Just because you don't like something. You cannot take that monument down. Now, that Supreme Court decision has held quite in 2 cases in Virginia with the courts coming to a Confederate monument. This past week, it has came down to be at one in Greenwood, South Carolina. You cannot take it down because you don't like it. That's the Supreme Court law. You got that one? That'd be fine. All right, now, I got 3 sessions to do here. Mr. Crawford, I'm going to wake you up, brother. Now, you sit up here and tell me every time you up here, you talk about these lynchings. The South, you all time proclaiming the South ain't but a lynching bunch of mobsters. Well, let me tell you something, brother. The biggest, most radical, racially motivated lynching in this country to date was in New York City, 1863. They took black folks, hung them from the lamppost, set them on fire. The returning soldiers from Gettysburg were sent to take and quell that rebellion, that riot. And this is in New York, man. Don't say it's just down here. No, but you implied that, brother. You implied that. You never said nothing about the other end of this spectrum. Lynching happens all over this country. But you did not say it. You just said it was down here.
No, I never said that.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You implied that was down here. You have shown extreme bias in this session right here.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Thank y'all. I won't food.
Janet Pate.
Janet Pate.
Barbara Pugh.
Good evening. I want to talk about history. The truth is the mother of virtue. If you destroy the truth, there's no virtue left. Some say this monument should come down because it is a monument to slavery. They say that the soldiers memorialized were fighting for slavery, that the war was about slavery and nothing else. These are all untruths. The truth is that the Confederacy was for limited and decentralized government, as opposed to a strong central government with one-size-fits-all policies from Washington, D.C. The Confederacy was against high taxes and for free trade. These are the same things we fight today. There's a mountain of evidence that the war was not about slavery. One, see Lincoln's own words to Horace Greeley, an influential editor of the New York Tribune. I can share the site for you. I'm not going to read it. It won't mean anything to you right now anyway. Secondly, see the original 13th Amendment, called the Corwin Amendment. This constitutional amendment would have guaranteed protection for the institution of slavery forever if the Confederate States would only return to the Union. It was passed by Congress and promoted by Lincoln at his inaugural address. The war started before the Corwin Amendment could be ratified. Check it out sometime and explain how the war was about slavery. There's a Wikipedia here. You can get it all from, her if you want it. Okay. Third, the Emancipation Proclamation. If the war was about slavery, Lincoln would not have promoted the Corwin Amendment at his inauguration. Instead, he would have announced the Emancipation Proclamation that day. Instead, he waited until January the 1st, 1863, to proclaim the Emancipation Proclamation. Even then, it only freed slaves in areas controlled by the Confederacy where Lincoln had no power, and left slaves in areas controlled by the Union untouched. Makes sense, right? Only if you have no regard for the truth. What was the war about? For about 5% of the free people in the South, including over 3,000 black slave owners in New Orleans, the war was about slavery because they had money invested in the institution. The rest, the 95% majority, had little stake in slavery. Slavery was not beneficial to them and actually suppressed development of free markets.
Thank you.
The war was not about slavery, but like everything else, including the debate today, about money, greed, and power. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh.
Patsy Hancock. Thank you.
Patsy Hancock, Chatham County resident. Let it be heard, we the citizens of Chatham County expect our commissioners to uphold the laws of North Carolina and not try to circumvent or look for loopholes to challenge the laws of our state. There were over 1,900 citizens from this county who went to war to protect this county, and they deserve the respect of their sacrifice, whether you believe in their cause or not. The people fighting for the South were still Americans, and the U.S. government eventually treated them as such. The graveyards around this courthouse and throughout the county hold the bodies of these soldiers: Pittsboro Baptist, Pittsboro Presbyterian, Pittsboro Methodist, Man's Chapel, St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church. Many soldiers never made it home. They lie in cemeteries in Maryland, Virginia, and New York.
They had names like Austin, Andrews, Barbie, Beavers, Bennett, Brantley, Bright, Brooks, Burke, Bynum, Carpenter, Council, Crutchfield, Dark, Edwards, Ellis, Emerson, Farrell, Farrington, Fashee, Fox, Fuquay, Gilmore, Golston, Goodwin, Graham, Hadley, Hackney, Harris, Herndon, Hilliard, Holland, Holt, Horton, Howard, Jenkins, Johnson, Jones, Kelly, Lassiter, Mann, Mason, Merritt, Morgan, Mulholland, Nelson, Norwood, Oldham, Parrish, Patterson, Pendergrass, Perry, Petty, Phillips, Poe, Powell, Richardson, Riddle, Rigsby, Reeves, Rogers, Sears, Seiler, Smith, Snipe, Stone, Talley, Thomas, Thompson, Tillman, Upchurch, Waddell, Ward, Webster, Wilkie, Williams, Wilson, and so on. These are our ancestors. Some names may sound familiar because there are now roads named after them. They own businesses in this county, and they may be your neighbor, or you may shop at their establishments. Will they be the next target? You bet. Stop this nonsense and concentrate on the issues that will actually help out the people of Chatham County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adele Kelly.
I am Adele Kelly, a resident of Chatham County. I want to thank the county commissioners for encouraging a community discussion on the Confederate statue. I know this is a controversial topic, and I'm sure that you've experienced the brunt of it. I want to voice my opinion on why I favor the removal of the statue to a more appropriate location. Many events have taken place since its installation. Our changes in demographics, formation of new businesses, and discussions of our values. This statue does not reflect who we are today, and I request that it be moved to a location other than at our town hall, the place of our county seat. The statue represents exclusion. It is an affront to many members of our community and thus should not sit in such a prominent location. We are a community that welcomes all people, regardless of race, religion, and beliefs. That is our strength. We accept change as a way to grow. These changes encourage new ideas and new businesses to become part of our future. We must also serve as moral leaders to our children, teaching them tolerance and understanding of our past and our present in order to create an educated population who wants to stay here and grow. I urge our commissioners to vote in favor of the removal of this statue to a place more reflective, appropriate to its history. On another note, I encourage all people in the community to eat at A&I Chicken Shack in Siler City. A place that has recently been a victim of racial bigotry. We are not these people and must support all businesses in our county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Cameron. Dean Cameron.
Boy, y'all got y'all's work cut out for y'all. I envy y'all. Y'all been up here all and having to face a lot of stuff. But I'm gonna start. My name is Dean Cameron. I'm a lifelong resident of North Carolina. 63 years old. I hear 18, 20, 27 years. I was born here. I was raised here. My family is buried in Bear Creek and Carmenton and Lee County. Now I'm going to start my speech here. What is a more fitting place for a historical monument than in front of a museum? Now we are here discussing removing an American monument. Yes, it is an American monument.